ever spent the time to come up with a theme, find the perfect props, create the perfect environment for dramatic play? Then you invite your students to play, and it's complete chaos. It may be because you are missing this one thing that you need to do before you invite your students to play in the Dramatic Play Center. Hi, I'm Andrea Miller with Everyday Inspired Play. Today we're talking about what to do before we invite our students into the Dramatic Play Center. You're finding all the perfect things, you've created the perfect props, you've brought in the perfect materials, you think the environment's perfect, but your kiddos come to the Dramatic Play Center and it's just a mad, crazy, things have been tossed on the floor, props have not been taken care of, things are being put away incorrectly, have been used incorrectly. Yes, I'm guilty, so guilty. When I first started teaching and I didn't know anything about dramatic play, I just thought, wow, this is the best thing ever, many, many moons ago. I just opened my dramatic play area and there it was. I just let them play. Sometimes it was great, sometimes and sometimes it was just a disaster, especially if I was introducing a new theme or topic that they might not be as familiar with. I want you to learn from my mistakes and start off the right way. So no matter where you are in your year, maybe you are just starting off, I would go back a little bit. I did a video on the kitchen setup that I've done and how to start off the beginning of the year. Or maybe you're in the middle of the year and they've had a lot of playtime and a lot of experience in dramatic play, but you have a new center, a new theme, a new topic that is happening in your dramatic play, something they may not be familiar with. You do not want to skip this step, and that's your introduction. You need to introduce your dramatic play center to your children. Simple and easy, yes, but it's a big thing that if you don't do it, you'll notice it. So try to make sure that you are introducing the dramatic play center before you're letting your children play in that center. Today I'm going to share 5 simple ways that you can introduce your dramatic play center. Of course, you don't have to use all of them. Of course, pick and choose what works best for you, but do remember to keep it short. You don't want to be doing a 30-minute introduction. So keep it short, simple, and remember this is something you should do before you let them play. However, depending on how long your center is up, if it's up for a week or 2 weeks or an entire month, you may be able to reintroduce and use some of these other strategies, especially if you want to elevate that play and imagination and make bigger connections and more learning opportunities for your children. So let's talk about introductions. First, simple and easy. I bring my kids over and invite them over to sit by the dramatic play area. So we have a new dramatic play center here, and I start doing this by introducing some of the signs, some of the materials I have, because I want them to get very excited. So I may introduce it by saying, ah, look, we have the Silly Skillet restaurant. This is going to be our new play center. Do you notice anything in the Silly Skillet restaurant that you are familiar with? Maybe something that we've played with before. Maybe they notice the frying pan and they say, my mom cooks eggs in the frying pan. Or I might say, do you see anything really silly about this restaurant? And they might say, it's green, everything is green. Yes, we have all green foods. And this is just a way for me to start talking to them about what they're seeing and helping them read some of the signs or reading some of the labels. So that's really the first place I start. I would most often use this center during our spring time, and they might know some of those things already. They may have been familiar with a restaurant that we've already had in place, or the kitchen materials that we've used. Maybe we've had eggs and now they're green eggs. So there's some discussion that can be had there. Of course, at the beginning of the year, I may just share what the signs are and the labels and so forth, and keep it very simple and short. The second way that we can introduce the Dramatic Play Center is very similar to the first, and it's really building on the language skills, building on new vocabulary as well as vocabulary that we've already introduced and maybe we're reintroducing or they haven't seen it for a while. So maybe we've talked about a skillet before, and here we're going to talk about the skillet again, and we might want to introduce that. This is a great way too, that we can show them some labels, and I might ask them, ooh, what do you see on that label? And they might say, oh, it could be a pancake or whatnot. And so I'm going to correct it for them and say, no, that's a piece of ham, but is ham usually green? So we can have that discussion as well. Or I might ask them, okay, and this is also helping those reading skills, which I have an idea for a video in the future, so stay tuned for that. But this is a great way for them to look at it and say, those are eggs. Or, somebody might say a flying saucer, or I'm trying to think of what a kid has told me before. And this is when we can correct it and build those language skills. Of course, I don't know too many people that have had green eggs, except kindergarten and preschool teachers that do it in their classroom sometimes, or fabulous moms that do that at home with their kids. So this is a great way for us to build those vocabulary words and those language skills while building all the parts of this dramatic play setup. The third way is always a great way, and one of my favorites, is to introduce it with a book. If you are doing any kind of theme, book study, author study, or a celebration or a season, this is a great time to introduce it with a book. Maybe you have read the book and then you invite your students over to play in the silly skillet, and then you can make the connections. You look in the book again, remember, what did he like? He was trying not to eat those green eggs and ham. So today we have green eggs and ham here at the play center, so we can pretend play just like the characters in our book. Or maybe you have Bat Cave and you have books on bats, nonfiction and fiction books. They could be something that you're reading at story time, but it also could be something that you can read right before you introduce it, or even bring them to the dramatic play center to read. Or if you're doing transportation, maybe you read a lot of books on transportation and you decide to put a train station in your dramatic play area. So it's a great way to use a book to introduce those things so that it can build on that imagination for them. I also love to include books in my dramatic play area. I started this a few years ago, and I really felt like the kids started gravitating to that, and then it came up in their play. So I would put them in the center or near the center. Sometimes I noticed they would read them during center time, or even they would just look at pictures and then they would talk about the materials that we have and make those connections. But sometimes they would just borrow that book and go read in the library and then put it back in the dramatic play area. After a little bit of training on that. But I always thought it was a great way to build that connection and really let them dive deep into what they're learning in the classroom and in their imagination. And the fourth way to introduce, and is a really important way, I just did a video on this recently, so you can check out that video, and that was on role play. This is a really big idea for kiddos to do, especially to get them comfortable with free play and imaginative play. Maybe you welcome them to the silly skillet and you bring one of your friends in and you guys pretend to do an order, and you ask them, what would you like to order today? Would you like green eggs? Would you like green ham? Would you like green bacon, green pancakes, or green waffles? And then they can order, and of course then we can put a plate together. Short snippet of role playing is perfect for a way to introduce how to play in the dramatic play before they go. And last, but probably one of the most important one, is you want to review or introduce the rules and the expectations for your dramatic play center. If you're in the silly skillet, it's a restaurant. So in the silly skillet, should you put pancakes on the floor? Are we going to sit at the table, or are we going to sit on the table? Are we going to cook with the skillet? Are we going to use it as a guitar? All of those things are great discussions. And as your theme changes or your dramatic play area changes, there will be new materials that you will have to introduce and new expectations of how you want them to play. So if they have never used the frying pan before in the activity, first you want to introduce that that's a frying pan or a skillet, and there's some different names for it. great vocabulary, but you also can tell them how we're going to use it. You can bring it out and introduce it and show them how to hold it, and that we're not going to whack anybody in the head with it, how you keep the egg in the frying pan and then you put it on the plate. Just little things that you want to see happen in your dramatic play center. And again, remember, all these 5 ways are really easy ways to introduce before they play. However, don't be afraid to keep introducing as they're playing and as they're growing in the dramatic play center. I hope that these introductions to the dramatic will have a smoother experience for you in your dramatic play center this year. If you are interested in learning more about the Silly Skillet, make sure to watch my ideas and inspirations for the Silly Skillet dramatic play setup. And always remember, every day is a great day to play and to learn. See you next time.